Hello, hello, it's Keegan, and I'm here with Aalisha Varnel for part two of the Coming Home Flower Essences educational dive. We're going to learn more. So if you haven't seen the first video, where we dive into um, these healing substances from nature that we can derive and partner with nature to come home to ourselves, to embrace a deeper level of embodiment, fuller level of self-worth, self-realization, ultimately. So welcome back, Aalisha, and
Thank you.
welcome everyone.
Thanks. Now, I've just got a couple of corrections that I want to make when I watch the first video because I talked about the dosage and the way that people can take flower essences. Usually, you take 3 or 4 drops under your tongue 4 times a day. That can get a little bit problematic. So, I do suggest that people can take a dosage in the morning and the evening, or they can add a half a dropper full. And in the first video, I said add half a dropper bottle full, and that's way too much. So just a half dropper full of flower essences in your water, and you can sip it throughout the day, and that's how you can take the dosage. The other thing, there was a couple of things I forgot to mention. Right now, I am looking for a lot of people to prepare and distribute this, but for right now, Keegan is the distributor in the US and he's willing to ship internationally, and I will be the distributor in Canada. And the cost for the flower essences, if you want to buy it from us, is $45. And if anyone prepares them, that was the cost that was given to me by the voice that gave it to me, by the loving, omnipotent organizing principle. So that's the cost that it should be. The other thing is, I just want to say that there is a relationship that develops with this, and I'm not going to get too much into that in the video today because that's a whole video by itself. But as you work with the Coming Home Flower Essences, you develop a relationship with them, and so for that reason, it's not appropriate to share your flower essences with other people, and it's also really not a good idea to give them as a gift unless you have permission from the person that you want to share this and ask people if they want to receive it as a gift. That's fine, but they need to know that this is like a commitment that you're making for probably at least 4 months, maybe 6 months, maybe longer. And it also may be cyclical, so you might leave it for a little while and come back to them. I come back to them every once in a while as well, although at this point all I need to do is think about the Coming Home Flower Essences and I get a dose because I've got this relationship with the flower essences that have developed. The one exception to this, well, it's not really an exception, but I did receive the guidance that if there are elders who want to take this and participate in this, because this is a tool to help with this evolutionary shift that we're going through. So if there are elders, and particularly frail elders, like people who are in seniors' homes and that sort of thing, who would like to participate, then they can receive this free of charge. This will be a gift to them. And if you are working with someone who has cognitive issues and you're not sure if you can't get their verbal permission, then you can always dowse and see if their spirit or their essence is giving you permission to use them. And so for elders, this can be received as a gift. Okay.
Aalisha, can I ask you, like, how is it that you feel when you're working with these? Like you said that now you can just feel like you're getting a dose just by thinking of the Coming Home Flower Essences. So, what is that feeling like? Can you describe it? And
Yeah, I would say it's like there's an illumination. It's like light. It's like sunlight. There's a sense of greater light. Yeah.
Mhm.
Like I guess now at this point, like when I was talking in the first video and I showed the picture of how you can get a Kirlian photograph and then this was a Kirlian photograph taken before the dose, and then you get a Kirlian photograph afterwards, and you would see that there's greater light in that. So I'm aware of that now. Like my energy field will lighten up after I get an energetic dose. It takes months of working with the Coming Home Flower Essence before that will happen, I think. But maybe some people it will be a shorter period of time, but that was my experience after working with them for several months. And also, I want to say that both Keegan and I have a number of documents that we will send out if you're ordering the flower essences. And in there, I talk about how that sort of evolved into the point where I'm able to experience a dose. The other thing that you can do, and you see, you don't have to physically take the flower essences, but because we haven't got to that point in our culture yet where people trust that, I would say continue to take them physically for a while. But after a while, all you have to do is hold the bottles. And because like what Iris did is she took a picture of a flower essence bottle with the Kirlian photography, and there was an aura of light around the bottle. So the light energy will emanate through the bottle. It's just most people don't trust that, right?
Well,
So
that's sort of like working with crystals. Yeah, I mean, water is a crystalline substance, and it holds the vibration of these various flowers.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
so it's like a flower crystal.
yeah. Yes, that's a good way of putting it. Yep. Okay. And the other thing I just want to reiterate is that the coming home flower essences will not override free will. So I just want to emphasize that these are not designed to fix you. They work with the intelligence of your soul development. And so they will help you find yourself, but they're not to be thought of in terms of, oh, I need this because I need to fix myself. That will lead to disappointment because it's both a very subtle influence and a very powerful. It's the ultimate alchemy. It's both subtle and powerful. And just a reminder that when we did test people in terms of how it increased their life force, 58 out of 6 people showed significant improvement in their life force when this was inputted into their meridian system. So trust that it does have value. And also if you dowse, and I'll be talking about dowsing a little bit more later, you can dowse to see if these are beneficial for you and see what information you get from that.
Great. And I want to say that's kind of that's really the way to approach healing in general. It's not so much that like I have this problem and I need to fix it. Actually, it's like I'm receiving this message. Like if your body is giving you some sort of symptoms that we might describe as illness, you know, whether that's a mental dysfunction that you're experiencing, emotional things, or physical symptoms, and one often leads to the other. All these things are messages to give us kind of a course correct, impulses for how we can best guide our lives. It's
Yeah.
like I think you described in the first video, staying in the middle of the road, um, and so that's how I think of it. It's kind of like when we start getting into the ditches, it's like we're getting illness where they have excess of something or we're deficient.
Hmm.
So it's about finding a good balance and going in the middle way. And so yeah, check out the first video if you didn't yet. It's we go into what the flower essences are, what's the history of how they came through, and how you can get them for yourself and work with them for yourself. And in this video, we're going to go more into how they can be used to affect the collective, how we can work with these as a form of subtle activism and activating ourselves to be a positive influence in the field of
Mm.
consciousness for
Yeah.
all humanity and for our whole world and ultimately beyond our Earth and into other reaches of space and time as well. So
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, we get to become an antenna and just beam all of this gift out to the world. So, what I'll do is I'll get you to pull up slide number 1, and that's the one where I've developed a questionnaire. And this can help people because this is subtle energy technology. I developed a questionnaire that I would suggest that people take, and the questionnaire will look a little different than this. This is on the slide, but I suggest that people make several copies of this, complete a copy before you begin to take the Coming Home Flower Essences. And there's quite a few questions on there that can help you determine as you go along whether you're seeing an improvement in the quality of your relationships, in particular, the relationship with yourself, the relationship with other people, and the relationship with divine guidance. So what I would suggest, take this before you start the flower essences, and then every 2 or 4 months, take it again, but don't refer to your first questionnaire until after you've taken the subsequent ones, right? So that you aren't influenced by what you said the first time. And that's just a little tool that I've given because I know that You know, I trained with a Feldenkrais practitioner who talked about the fact that most of the time what people do is they pay attention to where they're having problems and rather than where they're feeling better. And so it's hard for people to remember or to notice when there's just a very small change on a day-to-day basis that things are improving. But in particular, what I can see is that if somebody has a conversation with someone that doesn't go the way they want it to, they might think, oh, these aren't working. But the fact that you even had a conversation when maybe that's been suppressed for months or years or decades, that might be an indication that there's an improvement in communication. So it's not always what you think it is. So I provided this to just address that need for people to feel that they're getting a benefit from it. And again, as I said, I would suggest that you dowse to see if you're benefiting. Okay, you can come back to me. I'm just going to pull in my dowsing rods. Now, I wish that I had learned this. I have long dowsing rods, and the reason I have these is because you can't cheat with these. They pick up very, very subtle energies. But I got these dowsing rods like 15 years before I started using them. And the reason I didn't start using them, and I think the reason that a lot of people kind of hesitant to work with dowsing is that they think it's not scientific. Now, I would like to say that they are scientific, but right now we're at a pivot point in terms of all of our social organizations, and science is no different. And what we have right now is a scientific modality or scientific interpretation where we're still primarily focused on what is referred to as reductionism. But what I see happening, and this is in my documents from the Cultivating Genius work that I'm doing, is that there are other scientific methodologies which today are considered pseudoscience, but within the next decade, I expect that all of these qualitative science, electric universe science, metaphysics, and acoustaceuticals, I expect that all of them will be incorporated in the new scientific model that's coming. And in qualitative physics, I've got this in the show notes. This is a book, Hidden Reality, and it's Dr. Ibrahim Karim, and he's talking about biogeometry. And what is happening right now is that there are many architects trained to work with and to create architecture and homes and buildings that have a greater coherence within the building themselves. And a lot of that is worked on based on the work of Dr. Karim. And these people, it's all based on dowsing. They have very specific, very detailed dowsing tools that they use, but many architects are studying this methodology, and we're going to see a profound shift in our architecture to create more coherent spaces for us to live in. So dowsing is scientific. It's just not everybody knows that yet. Okay.
I love that. I never heard of acoustaceuticals before. That's a nice word.
Yeah. Yeah. So what happens is that I would say the coming home flower essences are vibrational medicine. As I mentioned before, Tesla says, in order to know the wonders of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. And I would say flower essences carry light vibrations, and sound healing carries sound vibrations. But there's this quote that's kind of hard to get your brain around where it says, light is visible sound and sound is auditory light. I still can't quite wrap my head around it, but the point is that there are these frequencies that can either be coherent or incoherent, and choosing to work with coherent frequencies can be enormously beneficial. Okay, so we can move on to slide 2. And so today what I'm talking about is how, in video 1, I mentioned the fact that the reason I was given this download of information is because I have been studying social evolution for over 25 years. And I'm not going to go over these characteristics today. This is basically a book, and I'm looking for someone to help me co-author a book. To understand the implications and applications of this is basically my entire work on social evolution. But I base it on a quote from Eric Weiner where he says, "We are living in a chink of time when the old order has crumbled and the new one is not yet cemented." So as I've been studying the movements that have been growing, I've been able to identify a series of patterns. And so on there you have the old order that is crumbling. And then what I'm suggesting is the patterns that I've observed and seen many, many organizations start working with these new values I call the genius model. So I didn't create this new model of social evolution. I just studied the patterns, and then I named it, and I call it the genius model, because genius, with my old Webster's dictionary, defines genius as the ability to see things differently. Now, I was working with this for a couple of decades, actually, where I was seeing that every social institution was changing. And eventually I thought to ask, but why is everything changing? Why is everything changing? This is, sometimes people talk about this as a new paradigm. This is way beyond a paradigm. What's a more accurate term is that this is a new axial age. And an axial age is when every single social institution changes. That's education, health, law, finance, business. Everything shifts. And that's what we're going through right now. And finally, when I thought to ask, why is everything changing? I heard very distinctly, this era marks the end of socially condoned tyranny. And it is the socially condoned tyranny and the value of the Coming Home Flower essences that are helping us move from the old order to the new order that I'm going to be talking about today. So what I would suggest is there's a couple of quotes on here that I'm going to pull up, and otherwise just come back to this slide at some time. And there's a lot to look at here. You can reflect on a lot of things here. And basically my work on social evolution takes a look at the application and implications of all of these characteristics. Now, the old order, Joseph Chilton Pearce has a quote at the bottom there. It says that we are shaped by the culture we create makes it difficult to see that our culture is what must be transcended. And what I'm saying is that it is this moment of time when our culture is being transcended. And the gift of the tyrant archetype is that it forces people out of complacency. So what we're seeing right now is all of these containment and constraint policies that are being put in place are forcing people out of complacency and into taking action. You can come back to me, and I'm just going to point out a book that can be helpful to take a look. The fact that this is a book called Who Am I in a Traumatized and Traumatizing Society? And this is a difficult read, but a lot of times what happens, and people continue to go along with the old order that is falling away, is that it's the norm, but it's insane. And in this book, it points out just how insane our culture has been. To live in a society where we live under a fear of punishment, under threat at all times, is insanity. And the only reason that we don't notice that it is because it's the norm. But it's not the norm anymore. And we're definitely moving out from that paradigm and that structure into new structures. So the notion of shifting, like what a lot of people are focusing on right now, is they're shifting from like federal government to provincial or state governments. It's the same structure. So it's not going to have a huge effect. We really need to rebuild structures, and we are. And those structures are coming from the grassroots up. They're coming through movements. And I have a 23-page document that I can send out to people. And on that, I've identified over 300 movements that reflect these new characteristics of social order. And so it's not just something that is a minor influence, it's a major influence. My work, I don't look at geopolitics at all. I don't look at the political process at all, although the term politico actually means gathering of citizens. So in a way, my work is more political than what we see in the political forum, because I study the movement of movements and the influence of movements on our culture. Okay, so you can
Can I
pull
say
up.
something briefly on
Sure.
that? Like, I mean, I think ultimately the movement is towards the inside of each of us, right? Where
Mm-hmm.
we have all this focus that we've been placing and faith that we place in forces outside ourselves to give us the solution. When really the solution for each of our lives is something that comes from within us individually, because we're all unique. Um, and so there's no one that can make the choices for us, for each one of us, better than we can ourselves. And so it's a time for us to step into that, to embrace that empowerment and that self ownership, self authority, and move to looking within for the solution.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up because all the other models that are out there that I've studied are really focusing on creating new economic models, and that's not where I start. What I start with is the statistic that 80% of us feel that we're inadequate. If we do something about that, that to me is the absolute root thing, is that we've come to believe people say I don't fit in, I don't belong. There's a lot of that. We'll talk about that in just a minute. And and so all of my work with the Genius model, with the Coming Home Flower Essences, the introduction to the Feldenkrais method, the Much Abides Spirit Reclamation Center, all of that is directed towards helping people remember that you do belong here. Combination one, the label on the bottle is I belong in this body, I belong on this earth. Combination two says I belong with this family, I belong with this group. Combination three says I am complete, my purpose is peace. So all of that reminds you, yes, you are supposed to be here, and you do have something to contribute, and you do belong. And that's the basis. And as more and more people remember that, then we will see the reflection of that out in our culture.
And can I share just from a personal standpoint? A lot of people tell me that I look like I'm still in my 20s, even though I'm 33. And I think if you decode the word belong, it can also mean be long, like something to help with longevity. Just an idea that occurred to me just now.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
because
Yeah,
it's
that's
this
great.
and the and that third affirmation goes along with that too. It's I think that the reason that I still look and feel as spry or like a 20-year-old than as I do is more about not succumbing to the stressful influences of the general programming that's available out in the world.
Mhm.
People are stressed out by the expectations of the norms of
Mhm.
what we're supposed to do and go along with. And
Yeah.
I've lived in such a way to and been blessed enough to live in such a way that I don't let that get to me so much. And I
Mhm.
think it's had a lot of benefit. And these working with nature and working with these flower essences can help us to embrace that and enjoy the benefits, to feel a sense of belonging and also to be longer.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I do a lot of work on my own health because I want to be here for the next 30 years to see this new culture. So I do a lot of work to stay healthy. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. And in my work on social evolution, what I've done is I've identified the patterns that I see moving up. The next one. Yeah. And then I've provided some templates I think that can help people move into this new order. And the first thing I'm talking about on the left-hand side there is the 5 stages of recovery from tyranny or from psychological abuse. And so these are the stages that I got really from, I think, Melanie Tanya Evans, who runs the Narcissistic Abuse Recovery Program. So that's for people recovering from petty tyranny, but it also holds true for recovering from tyrannical structures. And tyrannical, a lot of times people think it's government structures. There's really another whole level of tyranny beyond the government structures, but I'll let other people talk about that. So when people find that they are being compressed and contained, and there is sort of this cruel force that is preventing them from feeling empowered, they typically go through these 5 stages. And if you think back to 2020, a lot of this will make sense. So the first thing is confusion, where something is coming down and there is some kind of containment of people. It creates a sense of cognitive dissonance there. People don't understand what's going on, and the freeze response. And what I talked about in the first video was a formula called Rescue Remedy, or if you get it from FES, they call it 5-flower formula. And this is a flower essence, a very special flower essence combination. I also will sell it under the label shock absorber. And what it can do is it can help people come out of freeze. There are 5 different flower essences in them: rock rose, clematis, star of Bethlehem, impatience, and cherry plum. And so when people are in that freeze state, the amygdala is hijacked, the amygdala is running the show, and people are really incapacitated in terms of being able to make sound decisions. The second one is the fawning stage or the self-compromise, where people go along with dictates that are not in their best interests, and out of a sense of fear. And this is something I think is misunderstood by a lot of people. There is an understanding, and I offer in the show notes a resource that I found that's really good. And this comes from Pete Gerlach at sfhelp.org. And this is a self-study course on internal family systems thinking. And what happens in this is that it identifies the fact that we all have these protector subpersonalities within us. And those protector subpersonalities, which typically run below our level of consciousness until you start to study it, these protector subpersonalities will choose what is the best route for us to keep ourselves safe. And when people go into the fawning strategy, when they comply with things that they don't want to, this is not a character flaw. And sometimes in our society, we hear the term sheeple or normies that are very disdainful comments and sort of condemnations of people who are going along with strategies that are obviously or maybe not so obviously detrimental. But the fawning strategy is something that is chosen, or the compliance strategy is chosen by a much deeper level of our psyche than the superficial level. And it really is something that we can bring more compassion to. This is a decision that is made below the level of ego, below the level of character. It's made by our protector subpersonalities. And this resource that I'm quoting, Pete Gerlach's course, is a way in which you can learn to identify those protector subpersonalities and have a conversation and negotiate with them so that you're not being defensive or shut down unnecessarily. It's a fantastic resource. Now, what happens after the next stage is that the tyrants continue to implement containment strategies, and the next stage that people move into is rebellion. Sometimes this goes into rage and retaliation. And this is when a person who has been fawning and complying and saying, okay, if I just do what I'm told, then the authorities will recognize that and we will resume sort of a good dynamic. And when the tyrannical process just keep getting amped up more and more and more, eventually anger, which is a fantastic emotion and which is a emotion that propels people forward, the anger overrides that defensive strategy of fawning and people go into rebellion. And so right now we're certainly seeing rebellion being amplified. But this is the fire element, and whereas it is a good propellant, if people stay in anger for too long, it really depletes their life forces. So eventually what happens is that people enter into a state of fatigue, grief, helplessness, and hopelessness. And this is often referred to as a dark night of the soul. There is a sense of lost innocence, and as I think it's Kierkegaard who said, what we most fear has happened. We have been abandoned. And so there is a sense in this stage where people can't trust the authorities anymore, but they haven't developed a sense of authority within themselves. So this stage often leads to people surrendering and looking for assistance from, they may offer prayers, they may look for guidance from, they might do shamanic work with soul retrievals and that sort of thing. And they seek outside of themselves. They're looking for guidance from non-human intelligences to help them overcome this sense of inadequacy. When people really surrender into this place of helplessness and hopelessness, what will eventually emerge is the realization and the indomitability of the human spirit. And people will be able to find the courage, the resilience, the tenacity, the humility to move into stage 5, which is where there is a claim of personal sovereignty. And sovereignty means that a person steps into taking 100% responsibility for their property. Your body is your property, property as you understand it is your property, and the care of minor children and animals. And when people step into that phase, they are stepping into sovereignty and they're stepping into their adult responsibility. You can come back off that slide for a few minutes. What I see is that in our culture, it is not common for us to have a period of initiation between childhood and adulthood. And so that stage 4, when people go into that grief and despair, that actually becomes an initiatory state. They find themselves meeting a real challenge to face whether or not they actually have the skills and the competence to meet the needs of the human challenge. And if you completely surrender that, you will find that what emerges are the capacities that allow you to move in and take 100% responsibility for your life. So I know that you've studied sovereign law a lot, and I'm wondering if you want to comment any more on that.
I mean, if it's just like freedom is if freedom is a question of our own discipline, right? It's if we're not governing ourselves, then it's going to be done for us. Like there has to be an ordering principle. There has to be something that gives structure to the flow of our lives. And so if it isn't us, it's another force.
Right.
And there are some forces that don't have our best interest at heart at play in the world. And so this is our opportunity. And like I was saying about the sickness, it's kind of something, to guide us,
Right.
to kick us in the pants when we are not fulfilling the, the duty to manage ourselves.
Mm-hmm. And our purpose here on earth is to remember who we are. So I'll get you to go back to that one again, and I'll go on to the other template. So what I do in my work is I've identified the characteristics of the old order and the new order, and then I found different templates that help people make decisions. Now, with regard to the 5 stages of tyranny and how this relates to the coming home flower essences, what I see at the level of confusion, the flower essences that can help people move out of the freeze response, in addition to the rescue remedy, but in the coming home flower essences are Indian pink, shooting star, rock water, and wild oat. At the level of self-compromise, fawning strategy, baby blue eyes. Baby blue eyes really helps to mitigate the sense of lost innocence. And pretty face and buttercup, all of those help us move out of the fawning stage. In the rebellion or the rebellion or rage and retaliation stage, the fight stage, the combination number 2, the communication combo, and holly. And I'll be talking quite a bit about holly. The 2 that I'm going to be talking about a lot today are sweet pea and holly, and the rest of them I'm going to go over fairly quickly. At the level of fatigue, grief, and helplessness, we have combination number 1. I belong in this body, I belong on this earth. And we also have holly, rose quartz, scotch broom, and peace rose. And then at the level of sovereignty, this is where we enter into the hero or the alchemist archetype. And the hero sees life as adventure, and that's a very forward-moving archetype. They see obstacles as just part of the adventure, and a hero archetype, they're going to go over, under, around, or through those obstacles. Nothing's going to stop them. The alchemist archetype is really the archetype of flower essences and gem elixirs. And this is more like the union of polarities. So the alchemist will sit down with a cup of tea with somebody who doesn't agree with them, and they will have a dialogue where they can find the similarities. So an alchemist is more of an energy that accepts, but also it transmutes fear. It transmutes anger. It's a transmuting kind of archetype and bringing people to greater peace. And we'll go over each of the flower essences from this perspective, but the only ones I'm really going to focus on are sweet pea and holly. So another template that I use in my work to help people move forward into embracing and recognizing this new order is the idea of 4 apertures of focus. And when people are suffering, they're in mouse vision. This is where we're into analysis. And this is where, when we're in mouse vision, we can get into looping conversations in our mind, and we can really get stuck, and it can be a very limited perspective. as you go up to eagle vision, this is primarily what my work on social evolution is about. This is where I'm recognizing relationships and collective patterns and archetypes. So this is where, as soon as you start focusing on patterns of behavior rather than the specific details of it, you activate the witness aspect of our ability to see the world. And from the witness perspective, we're not as engaged. We're moving up out of the bottom levels on the scale of consciousness, from reactivity to respond ability. Then at satellite vision, if you think about what happens with a satellite, you can see where weather patterns are forming. And so when people move right up into satellite vision, they can sort of take a look at the infinite potential of human experience and how do some things emerge in reality and other things don't. And this has to do with what we focus on. So what you focus on exists, what you focus on persists. And then there's galactic vision, which goes way up. And this is where we're talking about a cosmology. And the cosmology that we've had in the past, we've had for several hundred years, which is more of a religious cosmology, I see that this is being replaced more with an animistic cosmology, which is what the indigenous and aboriginal peoples tend to look at, where everything around us has a spirit. And we can tap into the spirit and the gift of things around us. You can just come back to me for right now. And I'll just move on with this a little bit. So in an animistic cosmology, this is where, like, the indigenous peoples might have a prayer that says, Great Spirit, Mother Gaia, I am here I'm here to ask for healing and guidance on behalf of the plant people, the rock people, the creepy crawlers, the finned ones, the furred ones, and the winged ones, all my relations. So in an indigenous cosmology, there is this understanding that everything has a spirit and that we can garner wisdom from everything around us. And this is one of the things that I see we are moving in that direction, away from more of a hierarchical cosmology based on God in heaven. And more people are opening their mind to this fact that we can gather wisdom from all of these other aspects of creation. If all the world's a stage, from the galactic vision, we say all the world's a stage and we're the players on it. So what part do you want to play? And if you're playing the part of, at the level of the third level of recovery from tyranny, people are playing the part of the rebel. And the rebel is a very important archetype to participate in at times of amplified tyranny. But then people go into stage 4, which is the sense of helplessness. That's the child archetype. And that's where people learn to soften and receive. And then what my work does is it encourages people to come to the hero archetype and the alchemist archetype. And that's where the Coming Home flower essences really shine, because they really help people to move through that transition from fawning to being in a place of sovereignty. And that's where we'll get into in specifics pretty quick. So I could go on to the next one unless you have, let me see. I think I want to talk about, no, I don't want to talk about that. No, I won't. Do you have anything to add?
I just have a question about so what if someone feels like they're already kind of advanced up towards the later stages of those? Can they still work with the flower essences, and what that might be the
Oh,
looking to
sure.
do?
Yeah, yeah. And that actually is a good segue into the next into the next slide. So I'll answer that as we go into the next slide,
Great.
because the next slide is the quadrants of social evolution agents. And so what I've observed is that about a third of us are still aligned with the left-hand side on the characteristics of social evolution. So we're still aligned with the hierarchical, power-based, impositional, and punitive model. so the old culture that we're moving out of. About a third of people are still aligned with that, but what I've noticed is about 2/3 of the population are aligning with most of the characteristics on the right hand side. Now, it may be that most of those are, in other words, they're questioning what's going on in terms of our social institutions. And they might only be questioning one social institution, like they may no longer really work with a disease management model of allopathic medicine and they're working with healing modalities instead, or they might work with sovereign law instead of complying with maritime law, or they may be homeschooling their kids or whatever. But most people, about 2/3 of the population, as I observe it, are moving into contributing to this next era of social evolution. And of those 2/3, I've divided them up into sort of 4 focus points. So there's the people who are in the sovereignty quadrant are focusing on justice. And these are the people that are creating parallel societies. They're creating private members associations, land trusts, land conservancies. And they're learning to operate at a jurisdiction that is higher than maritime law, which is what our mainstream culture operates on, so they have greater authority in their life. Those are the people that are really hands-on and they're doers, and they're actively creating the new culture, and they know they are. And then another quadrant is the healing quadrant, and this anybody who's involved in healing other people, animal care, healing for the earth, the water, the air, they're involved in healing quadrant. The humility quadrant are people who are asking for guidance from non-human intelligence. And there's different quadrants in this. Some of the people who are really sincere in prayer, they are cultivating humility by asking for guidance from Jesus or God or Yogananda or other spiritual leaders that they have a connection with. The other group that I put in here are the Aboriginal Indigenous people, and they have ceremonies and healing processes where they are cultivating humility and asking for guidance from the plant king, the plant people, the animal, the stone people, and so on. And the third group that's in the humility quadrant are the people who are listening to channels. And this is hundreds of millions of people are listening to people like Cryon and Alcazar and the Z's and the Theo group, and so many people are following along with people who are channeling intergalactic beings or interdimensional beings. It's a huge deal, and those people are working with meditations and activations, and they typically are pulsing. They meet for meditations and activations, and they pulse this really coherent frequency out into the collective experience. And that whole quadrant, that the quadrant of, or at least the part of the quadrant where we're talking about people working with channels, a lot of people don't even know that's going on. And it's a big deal. And it's really powerful, the coherent frequencies that they're pulsing into the field. And then the fourth quadrant is where people are relying on human intellect. And this is the quadrant where we have inventions and where there's a lot of analysis and the typical sort of thoughts of people with high intellect, and they are solving problems through the inventions that they're creating. The other people that I'm including in this quadrant are the people who are taking a look at human history and questioning what we've been told about human history, both in terms of the far distant past, like what was going on in Egypt, as well as the ideas of perhaps the 1700s and the whole idea of Tartaria. Where this really matters is that we have had zero-point energy technology in the past. And so there are some people who are trying to create that new form of technology today, and there's other people who are reviving it from the past. So it's a very important quadrant. I'm going to come back and talk about that more as we go along. But I just want to point out that with what I see happening now, and this answers your question, like what happens with the people who are already experiencing life as an adventure, like they're working with the hero archetype and the alchemist archetype, is that what I would really like to see is more of a blending between these four quadrants. And in particular, I would love to see a blending between the sovereign quadrant and the humility quadrant. These seem to keep themselves fairly separate, but I'm going to really talk about this when I get to talking about Sweet Pea. I would really there's so much similarities between these quadrants that I don't think they really realize. But the fifth quadrant at the bottom is the balance quadrant. So what I'm encouraging people to do is dip your toe into these four quadrants and find out what's going on with them. And I've got that 23-page document where there's just list after, one organization after another. And as you read through it, you can think about, well, which quadrant is this in, and where is my interest drawn to? The balance quadrant is where there is an awareness and appreciation of all quadrants. You know they exist. And what would really be beneficial for the people in the sovereign quadrant, because they know they're doing the work. These are the doers. These are the ones that are getting their hands dirty, and they're getting their boots on the ground, shovel in the soil, hands in the soil. And I think that quite a few people in that quadrant think they're the only ones doing the work, and they aren't. I don't think that there's any quadrant that's more important than any other. But right now, what I see is that people are starting to merge and create connections from one quadrant to the next. And that's another layer of networking and another way of building the new culture. When people in the sovereign quadrant go off the road, when they go into shadow, they tend to create an external tyrant or an external villain. And they tend to blame the government or the globalists, or they tend to blame other people, like the sheeple or the normies. And when they go into shadow, it's not productive. So you just want to be aware of what the shadow is, aware of the kind of conversation that can happen when you go into shadow, try to get yourself back on the road. The other three quadrants, when they go into shadow, they're looking for an external savior. So as regards the healing quadrant, this is when people say, you've got to follow this diet, or you've got to do yoga, or you've got to do this or that. And they tend to put all their eggs in the basket of the healing modality that they're working with. And they can become very overbearing, trying to convince other people of the benefit of that healing modality. In the humility quadrant, people when they create an external savior, they don't have enough sovereignty. They're just spending all their days doing meditations and activations, and they're not really engaged in the 3D world. And so the cosmology that many people are adopting is that we are spiritual beings here to have a physical experience. But when people in the humility quadrant go into shadow, they can tend to give over their human experience and just want God to save them, or the intergalactic or the Palladians to save them, or they can go into giving over all of their power to an external source. And in the intellect and invention quadrant, when they go into the external savior, it is, this invention will save the world. Now, I think 0 point energy is going to save the world, but it's but not by itself. We have to have our own spiritual evolution in order to contribute to what's emerging. So that will make more sense as I go through the different flower essences in relative to what's going on there. Okay, so we can move on. Did that answer your question about what happens with people who are already in the hero and the alchemist archetype?
Yeah, I really like this idea of the fifth quadrant. I think that could be really something for us to strive towards, and so that's inspiring. I can see this, movement of movements of people kind of working towards an embodiment of the fifth quadrant and finding themselves there, of reaching balance between all of those. And I was thinking of the numbers of if there's four quadrants and then there's a magical fifth one. I don't know. I was multiplying them, the 5 and 4, and we get 20. Like, we have 20 fingers and toes, and it makes me think of I'm complete. My purpose is peace, and just being who I am in balance and in wholeness.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's something that we're striving towards to remember who we already are,
Mm-hmm.
as a balance of all of these things, engaging with listening to the wisdom of spirit that's available in so many forms, is life in everything, that has every creature is a teacher, that has a blessing and a gift to offer, and as each of us also has a gift to give.
Mm-hmm.
And then combining that with our autonomous agency and the power in our voice to stand forward and to be integrating that sovereign quadrant, and then I had the blessing to be a volunteer at the Resonance Science Academy years ago with Nassim Haramein, and they were working on this, zero point technology. And that a conversation we kept finding ourselves having there was that, we have to arrive as our species, we have to arrive at a certain consciousness in order
Yes.
to use this technology. And actually, the consciousness and the technology totally go hand in hand.
Yes.
We can't reach one without also bringing the other one along. Um,
Yeah.
so,
You and I are definitely singing in the same choir. Okay, as we go into taking a look at these flowers, I just want to point out to people that as you look at the screen, you can actually pick up the vibrational frequency from the pictures on the screen. And Keegan has found all these beautiful pictures, so just enjoy them as we go through this. So. Shooting star, as it relates to how it can help with this evolution of human of our collective organization, there is a greater acceptance of people with a more heart-centric intelligence. So highly sensitive people, it's easier to be an intuitive today than it was 50 years ago. There is a greater understanding that the intelligence of the heart and the intelligence of the gut is adding to the intelligence of the mind. And so what happens is that the people who are most in need of shooting star tend to be the highly sensitive people, the intuitives and the empaths. And so this helps them to find their voice and to feel that they can speak out and share their experiences. The extreme bullying, shouting, and denigration of this time is very hard on sensitives. And so the coming home flower essences help sensitives anchor into their body. And it also supports those who have a memory of their galactic origin, people who have a memory of coming from other star systems. So that's all I'm going to say about that one. Sweet pea, I'm going to talk about quite a bit. So I'll have you pull up sweet pea. And this is one of the two flower essences that I think are most valuable in terms of our collective experience. So sweet pea has to do with this notion of trying to find a home, trying to feel that we belong. And I'm definitely going to focus on what I call displacement trauma. So there are many things in our culture which cause us to feel and to search for things outside of ourselves. So sweet peas helps to mitigate the consumerism and trying to fill the hole in our heart with things that we buy and consume. It also helps us mitigate clutching onto something outside of us rather than focusing on within. It definitely, the issue of homelessness is a huge issue. So that is a clear and obvious kind of displacement trauma. There's also other kinds of displacement trauma that is not so obvious, such as the decline of the extended family. Over the last century, the last 50, 60 years in particular, there's been less opportunity for people to connect with their grandparents and their grandchildren. This is creating a great deal of grief, particularly among grandparents, where what they grew up with the grandparents of today, when they were children, had access to their aunts and uncles and grandparents. And that dynamic is not as strong today. And so there is some displacement trauma there. There's also displacement trauma in terms of isolation of seniors. And we certainly saw this where seniors were isolated in 2021 and 2020, and that was really heartbreaking. But another isolation I just want to, regarding seniors, that I want to bring attention to is the isolation of seniors because of technology. And so many seniors do not understand how to use this technology. And particularly what I have found is that older women are really wanting to engage in a lot of activities to create a better world for their grandchildren. But when they try to join different courses and so on, they don't understand the technology. They don't understand the apps. They don't understand how to even, there's lots of people I know that don't even understand how to work with Zoom. So I want to raise awareness of this type of isolation that is happening with seniors, because I think a lot of people who are creating these online courses I would like to ask them to do a better job incorporating and helping people who don't understand that technology how to use it, because it is a form of displacement trauma where older people feel like they don't belong anymore because they don't understand how to connect with other people. Other aspects of displacement trauma are urbanization, long hours in school away from family and with peers, a lack of connection with the earth, and then I'm going to talk about the Indigenous and First Nations people. So I think you can come off of that topic for right now, and I want to get into that. So there is an understanding. I remember of the importance to know our history. And when I went to Dachau concentration camp many years ago, there was a sign above the concentration camp that said, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it." And what has happened with the most obvious example of displacement trauma has been the displacement of Aboriginal and Indigenous peoples around the world. And there is a lack of understanding of just how significant that those dynamics are. And what I see happening is the type of dynamics and patterns and choices that were made that separated and isolated Aboriginal Indigenous peoples is now, those dynamics are reemerging in our dominant culture. And so I think that it's really valuable for people to understand that that if we do not acknowledge and repair our past, we're going to repeat those same patterns. So there's a couple of resources that I would suggest to people, and particularly I want to focus on the sovereignty quadrant, because what I see happening right now, when I understand more about the history of Indigenous and Aboriginal peoples, is that they really demonstrate having gone through all 5 phases of psychological abuse or trauma. They went through the phase of confusion, then they went through the fawning stage, then they went through the rebellion stage, and generations have gone through the stage of helplessness and hopelessness, and seeing a lot of social problems develop as a result of the crushing of their culture. And now what is happening is that they are emerging, and there is a cultural revival, and people are learning their language, and they are restoring their customs. And so I really think that it's valuable for people in the sovereignty quadrant to become more knowledgeable about the whole dynamic that has influenced Indigenous Aboriginal people, because a lot of those patterns are repeating. And we can also see how they have recovered from these generations of cultural and displacement trauma, and they're regaining their culture back. And so we can look to them for inspiration as well. So there's a few resources that I've got, and they'll be posted in the show notes. And one of the resources is an organization called itnj.org, which is the International Tribunal for Natural Justice. And on there, you can Google on there, you can go in and understand the doctrine of discovery. So the doctrine of discovery was, I'm just going to talk about this very briefly, but it was what's called a papal bull that went back 500 years. And this was a decree that was put out by the Pope. He gave permission for the representative of kings from different European countries. They could go into lands, and if the people in those lands were not Catholic, they were not considered to be human. And so the people who were conquering those lands could do whatever they want with them. It was a dehumanization of people. And it wasn't just a papal decree that gave people permission to do whatever they wanted with them. It also said, by decree of God, you can control these people and do whatever you want. Well, that was enormously damaging. And it stood for 500 years. And it's only been recently, in 2023, that the Pope apologized for the doctrine of discovery. And so that's kind of like, now we're unraveling that tyrannical matrix that has been in place for many years. But there's a lot of unraveling that needs to be done, because the doctrine of discovery has been used in arguments in court cases involving land claims. And in different parts of the world, land claims and Aboriginal land rights are coming up again. And I've been watching sort of in what is happening in Canada and Australia is that there is a rise in divisiveness and a rise in racist statements towards Indigenous and Aboriginal people as they are moving in the direction of restoring their sovereignty. And there's a lack of understanding that there are many outstanding land claims that have never been resolved, and many land claims that were many land disputes that were resolved in court on the basis of the doctrine of discovery. So in Canada alone, the doctrine of discovery was used in 70 different court cases to determine what's going on with these land claims, and does all of that need to be unraveled? So we need to bring an understanding to a greater understanding of the history of the people who most demonstrate displacement trauma, because this is an aspect that we all feel. And if we understand the history of what happened there, we'll do a better job understanding what's happening to us now and how we can move into sovereignty. So there is a a film series called In the Circle of Life, and Zaya and Maurizio Benazzo have created this. It's a series of 11 documentaries. I'm going to want to show these documentaries, and basically what happens in them is it shows the impact of displacement trauma. People tell their stories, and then you see not only their stories, but you see them recovering and claiming their sovereignty back. And every one of these stories, you go into 11 different Indigenous populations, they tell the same stories, you see the same patterns. And some of those patterns are patterns that we see in our culture as our culture is breaking down and more tyrannical influence are being placed in our culture. So there's a lot to understand about ourselves when we understand what's happened with the history of those people. And there's a lot of inspiration of how we can recover and heal from those influences.
Yeah, I'd love to just chime in briefly about that. Going through this history, the doctrine of discovery and the tactics that were used were a systematic separation of people from the land, right? Because the land is where we draw our sustenance and our power and ultimately our sovereignty and a right to self-determine. It comes from our ability to provide for ourselves by having a relationship with the land. And so we've seen how that has I would say progressed, but it's not progress. It's what has been labeled as progress of civilization ongoing and becoming less and less linked in partnership with our Mother Earth, who gives
Mm-hmm.
us life. And we, instead of looking to her to heal our ailments, we choose to trust the pharmaceutical industry, which has there are derivatives from nature, but there's all this man-made kind of medicines, as they call them, which were started as part of the petroleum industry, right? With the
Yeah.
Rockefellers and wanting to find a way to capitalize and on people and treat us as property, as something to be capitalized off of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
And just on that note, one of the inspirational things I heard in one of the documentaries that I've just mentioned is that an Australian Aboriginal man talking about how traditionally, by the time a child is 10 years old, they know how to survive on the land. And it talks about the fact in Australia, they teach people the song lines. And as they walk across the land, they learn the songs of the land. And the elder said, if you know your songs, you know your country. And if you know your country, you're never lost.
wow, yeah, and they travel by using the song lines, right? The
Yeah,
understanding that the land is and all the beings are all singing this great song of life, which
yeah,
is why we call it the universe, right? As a song
yeah.
and it's poetry. We're all expressing our creativity through the sound and the frequency, this our signature resonance that we're emanating,
Hmm.
and so
Yeah.
we influence each other and bounce our vibrations off one another. And at this time, our vibrations are coming back into a state of wholeness and connection
Hmm.
and partnership,
Yeah,
and realizing that we are nature, and integrating these frequencies back
yeah,
together.
yeah. And the coming home flower essence is so good at helping us do that. Okay, so we'll move on to baby blue eyes. Um, yeah. So baby blue eyes mitigates patriarchal dominance, toxic masculinity, control by threat, or the father wound. And where we see baby blue eyes can help in terms of the collective is that right now, I mean, this is February 11th. We have in 2026. So we have just had a major drop of the Epstein files, and there are many people reeling from the implications and the information that is coming out of those files. And there are so many people grieving the loss of innocence of young people. And Baby Blue Eyes is all about that. Baby Blue Eyes is all about helping people grieve the loss of innocence and also heal the father wound. And what we're seeing in the collective is there is a reemergence of people remembering that the divine masculine energy is here as protectors. The divine masculine, men as protectors. And many men are learning sovereign law. They're learning how they can work with those practices to protect their children and to protect their family. This baby blue eyes in this way as we restore divine masculine energy. It helps people move into the stage 5 of recovery where people live a sovereign life. Okay. So this is much more powerful. It's such a delicate flower, but this relationship between grieving the loss of innocence and men stepping forward as protectors, remembering the divine blueprint of the divine masculine. Okay, so we can go on to the next slide. And this is pretty face. And at the collective level, this mitigates the propensity to focus on the ugliness of the world. And it mitigates toxic femininity, gossip, and backstabbing. There's a greater reverence for the body. To quote from Course in Miracles, I am as God made me. Right now, we're seeing a major backlash towards plastic surgery and towards Ozempic, and people and women turning themselves, using these modalities to make themselves look almost alien. And there's a huge backlash against this right now. So Pretty Face helps helps people to recognize that beauty comes from within, not from without. The other thing is that this is an amplification of divine femininity. And so, again, there are a lot of women who are choosing to let go of that idea of the need to have it all or to compete with men. And a lot of women are moving into working with part-time work and really embracing the gig economy so that they either work part-time or they work seasonal so that they can spend more time with their children. And that is definitely a pattern that I see emerging. So what I am seeing is a reversal of the last 50 years of the masculinization of women and the demasculinization of men. And people are remembering the divine blueprint. Anytime you want to chime in, you can. Otherwise, we can move forward to Borage. Okay, so Borage helps people focus on solutions. And this is stage 5 of recovery. The hero's journey is about solutions. It's about whatever life throws at you. Life is an adventure. We're going to get over, under, and around those obstacles. Now, one of the things that I want to point out here in terms of moving out of the fawning stage is there is a resource called The Pyramid of Power by Derrick Broze. And what Derrick focuses on, there's 18 actual videos in his series, and he focuses on the characteristics on the left-hand side of that comparison I did between the old order and the new order. And he's talking about, and he provides information with people as to the breadth of corruption and the breadth of tyranny that have led us to this point where people are now stepping out. Remember, this era marks the end of socially condoned tyranny. So what Derrick does in his video series, The Pyramid of Power, is he shows how the same patterns of tyrannical oppression have been expressed in all of our different social institutions. What I'm doing with my work is I'm focusing on solutions, and I'm focusing on many of the inventions out there and the processes and the philosophies and so on that are leading us into the new era of social evolution. And it's good to know both. So I know that what you can come back to me for a minute now. I know that what a lot of people say is that they just want to live in peace. They don't want to focus on the negative. But what I would suggest there is that when I listen to some of those people, like, that's totally valid to focus on peace. That's an emanation of peace out from you into the collective. That's much needed now. But I see that a lot of people are actually pressing down fear. They're not really facing their fears. And so I would suggest that people think about taking a look at, well, take a look at Derrick's work, because this helps when you see the patterns of the tyrants, then you know why we're in this mess. And instead of just feeling that sense of helplessness, once you understand the patterns, you're more able to understand why we need to move away from that, and to feel inspired to take action to move away from it. So I think that his work is very complementary to mine. He focuses on how we got here, and I'm focusing on how we're getting out of it.
Awesome. I actually haven't watched The Pyramid of Power, although I've seen, kind of similar, movies like The Zeitgeist and Thrive that dive into the
Right.
existing, problem of corruption and how deep it goes. But I will definitely encourage people, if they haven't heard of, Derrick Broze and, the Conscious Resistance Network, to look into. There was an event that just concluded this past week. That,
Mhm.
this is the 7th year they've done the People's Reset, as it's now called. Originally, it was called the Greater Reset in response to the Great Reset, which was this plan put forth by Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum,
Yeah.
to create this reality in which we own nothing and we're happy, right? As they say, and so in response to that, what's now called the People's Reset, co-organized by Derrick Broze, is a wonderful community of people who are focusing on solutions.
Yeah.
Solutions from the standpoint of our consciousness and taking care of ourselves uh,
And the land.
and the land and permaculture, and so and these conferences have been broadcast and are available. The recordings are available for free on the
Mhm.
Conscious Resistance Network,
Yeah. Yeah.
through. Um,
And in his Pyramid of Power series,
yeah, go
yeah, I
ahead.
think the Conscious Network is its own website.
Yeah, there's that, and and Odyssey. I was thinking of the platform. They have a
Yeah.
channel on Odyssey where they have all those recordings available, and there's wonderful solutions, presentations, like so many different, liberating technology, how we can create technology and parallel systems and networks, and how we can actually embrace all these solutions to rise
Yeah.
into a remembrance of our power and
Yeah.
our connection.
And I've certainly got many things in my document that support what they're talking about there. The thing that I really like about the Pyramid of Power is that Derrick stays right in the middle of the road. He doesn't become too dramatic. He's not helpless. He's right in the middle of the road. It's a very pragmatic approach, and he takes a look at each one of our social institutions and talks about it. So it really provides a good synthesis, and you can see how the patterns repeat through all our social institutions. So it's a really good resource. Okay, then we'll go into mallow. And mallow is the flower essence that helps gathers the grounding and security influences of the other essences in the combination and bridges to the combination two, which is the communication combo. Mallow is mellow. We don't need to shout at each other. It helps people move out of stage 3, rebellion. And as Mark Kingwell writes, social concourse is one citizen polishing another, not only so that rough spots and edges be removed, but also so that one may begin to reflect another in the social project of public life. So what we are seeing as we enter into this next era of collective action is replacing debate, which is fundamentally a combative form of communication, with dialogue. And in dialogue, people listen to each other, and the focus is on the process of dialogue, not the outcome. So dialogue I see as a process where we polish each other. We learn how to listen. We learn how to be compassionate listeners. And so there's a new form of communication that isn't trying to win or to disempower other people, but to polish each other so that we can all shine. Okay, the next one is we move into combination 2, which is a communication combo, and this is absolutely a gift to the world at this time of great divisiveness. It's the sense of transmuting the sense of injustice. It recognizes that the tyrant archetype, the communication combination, recognizes that the tyrant archetype forces people out of complacency. Anger is the propellant that forces people out of complacency. And once you're out of going along with it, then we have to find new ways of communicating, because now we are the people that are in the positions of power and influence, and we're not just going along with the old structures. So calendula helps people move from an argumentative debate form of communication to dialogue and heartfelt communication. And it assists with moving people to stage 4 and in recovery. So I'll come back off of the slide right now, and I just want to talk about this, because when people are in stage 3, when they're in rebellion, the element that is amplified there is the fire element, and the fire element is very good for transmutation, but it also is destructive. When you go into stage 4 of recovery from psychological abuse, this is the water element. And what I noticed with the murder of Charlie Kirk is that there was this pulse that went right around the world. And I heard people talking about it, that they would say, I didn't even know him. I don't even know what he did, but I'm crying and I can't stop crying. And what I think happened at that moment is that so many people just said, what are we doing? All this hatred, all this divisiveness. And they just said, I don't want to participate in this anymore. I don't want to be right. I want to heal. And so I'm just going to offer something that came to me about the importance of the water element. And this was a poem that came to me in 2021 when I was on a call with an organization called Corelight, which is a spiritual community, and they were talking about the divisiveness of that time. And so this poem just came in, and to me this is a really good reflection of stage 4 of recovery from psychological abuse, where the tears are being shed, and the water element is helping to quench the fire element. So this is the poem. It's called Crying. We are crying and we don't even know it, because the tears taste like anger and disdain and the cold turn. No, let me try that again. We are crying and we don't even know it, because the tears taste like anger and dismissal and the cold turn of the knife of disdain. But beneath the othering, the making wrong, the raised voice of desperate fear, we are crying because we miss each other. And so that level, and Greg Paul of the Sovereign's Way does a really good job of talking about that. We need to go into that period where we stop pushing back, we stop rebelling, and we enter into our own grief, and we do our own healing. Because if we don't do our own healing from the grief that we feel, from the trauma that we've experienced in our life, we tend to project that on other people. And we get stuck in just rage and rebellion year after year after year. And it's time. We've had enough push with regard to rebelling. This has been going on for years now. And just with this recent drop of the Epstein files, now there are many, many people that are moving out of the fawning strategy. They're angry enough, they're outraged enough so that they're moving into stage 3. And there's so much fire. The world is on fire now. We need the element of water to help mitigate the harm of what's going on with the fiery element. So the communication combination where we learn to dialogue instead of debate is really important. And I'll just get you to pull up holly. This is one that I'm going to talk about for a bit as well. These two are really important, sweet pea and holly. So holly is the flower essence that allows us to let go of hatred, resentment, competition, and anger. It mitigates our disappointment with other people, reduces the tendency to blame the group over there, reduces the tendency for people to sit in their ideological foxholes, and to come out of that and find ways in which we can resolve our differences. It's the most important essence for navigating between stage 3 and stage 5, for moving from fawning to coming into sovereignty. And there is a transmutation from the defiant rebel archetype to the hero archetype, which is focused more on resolve. Now, I'm just going to pull this down a little bit. And I want to talk about those two qualities. We can come back off of the yeah. And I want to talk about the difference between defiance, which is in the rebel archetype, and how important it is to move away from defiance. Defiance, if I take a look at my Hawkins scale of consciousness, defiance has a number of, well, here's what I'll start with this. So this is my little teaching tool where this is a copper wire that I actually pulled out of my house. And so energy flows along copper wire. But what I talk about is when we're dealing with different emotions, we can talk about filaments of emotion. So if I take a look at defiance, the filaments of motion that make up defiance are courage. So one of these filaments is holding a current of courage. Another one is holding a current of anger. We also have arrogance that can be in a defiant energy, and self-righteous indignation. So different people run different amounts of current through these different filaments of emotion that make up the energy of defiance. But when you take a look at Hawkins scale of consciousness, the only one of those filaments that is in the coherent stage is the filament of courage. And all of the rest of them are in the incoherent phase. So when a person is in a very defiant state of being, they are, and it depends on the person, because some of them could be running a different amount of current through those different filaments. And what I would suggest for people is to take a look at some of the people who are out there holding podcasts right now. And I'm not drawing attention to them from a place of criticism, but just that it's sometimes easier to see what's going on when you notice it in somebody else than in yourself. So I'm going to talk about 3 podcasters out there who I think are doing a great job providing information with people that are motivating people to get out of the fawning stage. And that's Megan Kelly, Candace Olson, and Jimmy Dore. So all of them hold podcasts, and they're all running the frequency of defiance in their podcasts, but in different ways. So if you take a look at Megan Kelly, she's running a fair amount of frequency through the filament of arrogance. And arrogance looks like eyes rolling and this kind of thing going on. And there can be also sort of a tilt of the head, a tone of voice where there is a sense of superiority in there. And so she's defiant. She has a lot of courage. People tune into her because she's giving people information that you're not going to get in mainstream news programs and so on. And so she's providing a service to people, but she's got an amplification of arrogance in there. And that is something that you can see. If it triggers you when you see that, then that's an indication to yourself that there's some arrogance in you. Like if you get triggered by what somebody else is doing, you can ask, well, where do I see that in myself? And then if you take a look at Candace Owen, she is a very defiant person, and people talk about how courageous she is. She certainly is courageous, but she also has a lot of anger. And a lot of times what's happening with anger is that there is fear and hurt in the anger. And so the thing that concerns me about Candace is that she is so defiant that she's reckless about it. And that's what can happen with defiance, is that you can be, defiance can be reckless. And so she will say some things like, bring it on, bring it on. And what happens with that is she is taunting really dangerous elements when she says things like that. And she's a mother of two young children. What happens with defiance, and the reason I'm making a big thing about this, is that in the sovereignty quadrant, there tends to be historically a lot of defiance in that quadrant. And there are so many people entering that quadrant right now as a result of the Epstein files, as a result of ICE, as a result of a number of things that are going on, that it can generate a lot of conflagration or a lot of fire energy that can be destructive rather than transmuting. And then with Jimmy Dore, he has this self-righteous indignation, but I really, and it's so informative, because if you watch his podcast, he often does something which, with self-righteous indignation, people aren't actually trying to get out of it. They're looking for justification to stay in that state. And it's like you're in this spin cycle where you just grab a piece of information and another piece of evidence and another piece of evidence that justifies you staying in that state of self-righteous indignation. So it just spins around. And if you watch his podcast, he often will pull up a video and view it 3 or 4 times. He says, just watch this, just watch this. And then he'll throw his hands up afterwards. He says, can you believe it? And most of the time with self-righteous indignation, there's more anger in it, but perhaps it's because Jimmy is a comedian. He doesn't really get into anger, but he's definitely indignant. And the thing that's really valuable about watching him is that people can get into that dynamic where they just justify staying where they are, and they keep pulling out evidence to justify that. And that's what Jimmy tends to do. So if you watch him, not from a place of judgment, but just see where you are doing this, pulling in evidence to justify staying angry, because we have to get out of the anger. The rebel archetype and the rebel state is a really valuable state to override and overcome tyranny, but we can't stay there. And so I'm wanting to provide some other solutions for people. Certainly holly in the Coming Home Flower Essences helps people overcome that sense of injustice and the sense of defiance. What happens when you move into stage 5 recovery, where you move into the hero archetype, you're moving into a state of resolve. And so in resolve, a person says, okay, I'm here on the planet. I came here to have this experience, and I'm going to overcome the obstacles in front of me. And so in addition to courage, which is in here, all of the filaments of emotion for resolve, a willingness, a curiosity, discernment, reason, neutrality, they're all coherent, okay? So if you can transmute the energy of defiance into the energy of resolve, it's all coherent energy. And I just want to tell a quick story about my own experience. I worked with a technology called Theraphi, which is a plasma intelligence. I'll put it in the show notes. And Theraphi it's like an open field of coherent energy. And Paul Harris, on his website Vitality, there's many talks that he gives. He does a really good job of explaining this really complex plasma intelligence. But the last time I had a Theraphi session, you want to set your intention when you go into a Theraphi session. But what I said this last time is that whatever is in my highest good, I want the intelligence of the Coming Home Flower Essences to communicate with the intelligence of Theraphi. And whatever is in my highest good, that's what I want. Well, what I got was a healing of defiance. So my perception of myself is that it was part of my original blueprint to be a defiant person. I literally defied my kindergarten teacher. So I have a very long history of defiance. And I thought that was a part of my personality. And it turns out, no, it's actually a defense mechanism. And so what happened when in my session with the Theraphi device is that I had a really strong detox period of about 3 weeks where I was feeling quite sick. But I'm able to actually see defiance now as having limitations. And before I was just sort of at the affect of it. I just experienced defiance and I didn't really, because it's justified, I didn't see that it was harmful and that it created a separation between myself and other people. And so that's one way that I find that the Coming Home flower essences have changed my life is that I'm not anywhere near as defiant as I used to be. And I'm not anywhere near as reckless with that defiance as I used to be. And I'm glad. So there's a couple of other things that I can recommend in terms of if people are finding that they're spinning around in that self-righteous indignation and they keep telling the same stories over and over again and so on. There's the homeopathic remedy of Causticum that can be helpful for this. And this is this can help with a sense of where you just can't break free of that sense of injustice. And another thing that can help with that is the from the Biofield Tuning Store, the kidney cleansing programs from Eileen McCusick. She has 2 kidney cleansing, and this is for people who are pissed off and they're just staying pissed off and they can't get out of being pissed off. So both of those can help with the sense of injustice where you get stuck in that sense of injustice and defiance. And another one is the flower essence of Vervain. But if you work with the flower essence of Vervain, don't add it to the combos. You never want to add anything to the Coming Home flower essences. They're complete. But for people who are really stuck in that sense of injustice, Vervain mitigates the tendency to impose your will on other people. And so those are three things to mention. Okay. Any questions about moving from defiance to resolve?
I think that's really wonderful. You covered it pretty extensively. I would want to just like on the note of, you mentioned don't add any other essences to the combinations, and then so I just had a question around because they're combined into 3 separate essences in 3 different bottles, and each one goes with one affirmation. But then we're taking them all together. So is there a specific kind of reasoning that goes along with having them in the separate bottles like that? And can you
Yeah.
explain about it?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Yes, and I asked about that too. And so what I was told is that the affirmations on the bottle bring out certain harmonics in the frequencies of flowers in the bottle. And so for example, if Buttercup was instead of in combination number 3, Buttercup helps you to find your vocation and bring your medicine into the world. In combination 3, with that affirmation, I am complete, my purpose is peace. If Buttercup, which is about shining your light, if that was in combination 1, it would be more about getting a job and having financial security. But because it's in combination 3, where you're talking about that really high coherent state, this is about your vocation, not a job. This is your medicine. What have you got to bring to the world? So the different harmonics, so it adds another whole complexity to the whole idea of the Coming Home flower essences, because the affirmations determine which of the harmonics in those flower essences are going to be amplified. And so that's why they're separated into those 3 bottles. And so the first bottle, as I showed on in the last video, combination number 1, as it works with that affirmation, it addresses the incoherent frequencies down here. Combination 2 helps to address moves you from incoherence to coherence, and combination 3 helps you move even higher on the scale of consciousness. So the affirmations absolutely do determine which of the harmonics within the flower essences get amplified.
Would
So that's
there
an important concept. Thanks for asking.
Okay, and would there be a case in which it would make more sense to take 1 or 2 of the flower essences instead of taking all 3 of them together?
Yeah, that's something that you and I can do. That would be something that I could see in the future where if you decided you wanted to work with a specific thing like self-righteous indignation, what I could do there is I could douse to see which of the flower essences would be most helpful to heal that particular dynamic or to help with that. And then we could set an intention in a more of a meditative or ceremonial state where we would ask those flower essences to particularly resonate with each other. And then the harmonics of the holly will definitely be in there. So the harmonics of holly and probably peace rose will be there, and probably rock quartz, maybe baby blue eyes. I'd have to douse. I would not want to trust myself. I would douse. But what would happen is that as we call those specific harmonics forward, they can be amplified and they would provide a really specific pulse for that particular emotion, that particular incoherent emotion.
It makes me think of like a conductor working with the
Yeah.
symphony to evoke a certain emotion and to
Yeah.
have a certain catharsis and healing experience. It would be
I
so
mean,
interesting to see the geometries of these frequencies and how they kind of create an architecture, uh,
yeah. I mean,
transform.
the breadth of the coming home flower essences are something that I'm kind of scared to delve into because I mean, I could write a book about this because there's just an awful lot going on with this. Yeah. Okay, let's move on. Rose quartz. I'll be able to move through the rest of these fairly quickly. Rose quartz allows one to soften, and this is the only gem elixir in this combination. And you find the strength of compassion to oneself and to others, and it represents both the divine masculine and the divine feminine. So the strength of compassion, really important. And moving on to quaking grass. This helps people move from stage 4, the child archetype where someone is trembling, to stage 5, the hero. And it's particularly good for those in the sovereignty quadrant who think they are the only ones doing the work to create change. So I talked about that. That is when the people in the sovereignty quadrant go into shadow, they can actually become tyrants. If they start name calling other people and that sort of thing, then it is they're off the road. They're in the ditch. And what happens with quaking grass is that it comes together and it harmonizes all the different voices. So I really think that the coming home flower essence is best for the people in the sovereignty quadrant. Of all the different quadrants, they can really benefit from it the most. So that's where I see quaking grass really helping. And then we can move into Indian pink. Indian pink focuses attention, and it's a counterpoint to the soundbite culture of tweets and algorithms reinforcing existing beliefs. It mitigates the influence of influencers, the media, famous people, and propaganda, and it helps people move out of mouse vision and choose long-term strategies rather than band-aid solutions. It helps one stay in the middle of the road rather than the ditch of apathy or the ditch of unrealistic passion. Indian pink is really a centering and grounding flower essence. That's what it's so beneficial for. And there's a quality to it, like you see that the fiery colors in here. There is the element of transmutation of the fire element of transmutation. So helping to center yourself and to heal sort of the lack of focus. Okay,
Can
the
I say
next
something
one.
about that? Just like
Sure.
the red is like the root chakra, right?
Yes.
And like what we were speaking about before, about this was the has been the overall strategy to systematically, um, disconnect us as a species from the land to make us, controllable and corrallable into the civil body. Uh,
Hmm.
and ultimately towards tyranny and technocracy. And so, yeah, to become centered and grounded and
Hmm.
reactivate through the medicine, the root chakra medicine of Indian pink, as you can see,
Yeah.
is a great solution.
Excellent insight. Thanks. Okay, next one, zinnia. Again, I hope I'm not picking on the sovereignty quadrant. I have great respect for the people in the sovereignty quadrant. But right now, their responsibility is being amplified because so many people, as a result of the dynamics of the last 14 months in particular, so many people are stepping out of fawning into rebellion. And the sovereignty quadrant is where you really see that energy. And so to really encourage a greater understanding of the benefit of the rebel archetype, but also the realization that the rebel archetype is not the final stage. There's only a few people who are supposed to spend their life as rebels, and most people are supposed to evolve into a more coherent expression of that, learning how to transmute the fire of the rebel archetype into resolve. So zinnia is particularly good, again, for the people in the sovereignty quadrant who sometimes take themselves too seriously. And it's an excellent essence for group meetings if the focus is on limitations. What I found when I first did a deep dive into the sovereignty movements in 2021 is that the leaders would want to talk about process, and people would get into their stories and they would be raging against the government or the globalists or the sheeple or whatever, And so what happens with the zinnia flower essence is that it can help mitigate the desire to be argumentative and to fuss, and it can bring more of a playful quality to it, like all the world's a stage and we're the players on it. So what are we going to play? What's the role that we're going to play? And zinnia can help you, kind of bring in the fool element and be able to look at yourself with less seriousness, really. Okay, the next one, rock water. Oh, okay, rock water. This is the genius essence, where genius is defined as the ability to see things differently. And it also holds the essence of sfumato, which the quality of sfumato is the ability to let things go up in smoke. So beliefs that no longer serve you, allow them to go up in smoke. And rock water allows people to release those beliefs and to see things in a new light. Again, the element here is water, and the element of water and tears. And here's what I would like to suggest to people. Like, if you can cry right now, that would be a really good thing to do because there are so many people who are in such grief over what's going on with the Epstein files. And not everybody can cry, but I would suggest that find the things, if you feel that grief, instead of suppressing it, instead of allowing it to be expressed as anger, go into the grief. And there's a really great YouTube channel that I think can help, and it's called Hey Stranger. And the creator of that YouTube channel is a woman named Thoraya. And maybe you can come off of that slide for a second. And what Thoraya does is she has she does especially in her older videos, she does a close-up on people's face, and then she'll ask them a question, like a real question, like a heartfelt question, like, how are you really? And you just see all these emotions go across people's faces because she is the energy that she emanates, she creates such a safe place for people to be who they really are. And so they're vulnerable and they open up, and you see all, she's got this close up on people's faces, and she sees all these emotions going across their face. And it's so moving. It's the vulnerability of humanity that she captures. And not only in her videos, but read the comments down below. If you need to cry, if you need to remember the beauty of humanity, that's a great YouTube channel to go to and help to amplify that, help us to get back into feeling and to a heartfelt communication. So it's called Hey Stranger, and I highly recommend it. Okay, then Peace Rose or Wild Rose. These are the flower essence. This is a flower essence that works with courage and patience. Definitely Peace Rose and Wild Rose work with the alchemist archetype, transmuting fear into peace. And again, in the collective, it's choosing long-term rather than band-aid solutions. So it mitigates the sense of impatience where we just look to try to find whatever will make us feel better and take a look at long-term solutions rather than sticking a band-aid on it. Buttercup is the next one. We can go up to that one. This is humility, not self-effacement. And the difference between humility and self-effacement is fundamentally the energy of shame. But in humility, people, there's a filament of pride in humility, because people have to know that they are good at something, that they can contribute something in order to be humble about it. If they really don't know that they're good at something and they just say, oh, that doesn't matter. If somebody says, thank you for bringing forward this information or whatever, and a person says, oh, it was nothing. You're shaming yourself. That's self-effacement is not the same thing as humility. And a lot of people don't understand that. So with Buttercup, you have the filaments of pride, courage, and feasibility, an understanding that what you're offering is feasible and doable. And that those are qualities that are available in humility. And this is the idea of when your cup is full of who you are. You know, we have this phrase that says, oh, that person is so full of themselves. Well, that should be a compliment. Like a person, when they are full of themselves and their medicine overflows, that is a gift to humanity, you know. And so what Buttercup helps you to do is shine your light into the world and share your medicine. It really is the epitome of the affirmation, I am complete, my purpose is peace. And then we go into Lady Slipper. So Lady Slipper at the collective, Shooting Star tells us, Shooting Star from combination 1 says, I chose to be here, and Lady Slipper adds, and this is why. So this is where Lady Slipper helps you walk your vocation out into the world. And this is, there is an element of courage in here, but also not the kind of courage or the kind of disposition that overwhelms other people. There's a very feminine quality about this, and it sort of celebrates a generosity of spirit, a sharing from a place of compassion and desire to help other people. Okay, moving on to Wild Oat. So Wild Oat reins in erratic energies such as jumping to conclusions or scattering fragments of oneself on many issues. It keeps you in the middle of the road, excellent partner to Indian Pink. And with groups, it helps to synthesize action and coherence. It helps people to find the groups to collaborate with as well. Okay, so you try many different things and then you find the people that you share your vision with. It helps people move out of mouse vision. Okay, that's enough to say about Wild Oat. Scotch Broom expresses the polarity of optimism and pessimism. Like bad news, Scotch Broom spreads quickly and is considered invasive. However, its bright yellow flowers and tenacity can also be applied to staying the course in difficult times and seeking new possibilities and territories. Within a group, it helps shift the energy from look what's happening to look what we can do. So groups act rather than ruminate, rather than spin around looping the same conversations. Okay, let's take action. Okay. And so that's it for the flower essences and how they are contributing to collective action. So I just want to remind people that with working with the Coming Home Flower essences, the real benefit of this, there's benefit at the personal level, but what really engages me is the fact that every person becomes an antenna and they're spreading these coherent frequencies out into the collective field and really helping to contribute to the establishment of this new form of social evolution. And the other thing that came to me with the flower essences not too long ago, just about 2 months ago, is that when people work with coming home flower essences, that's like stage one. But once you are with a group, and many people in that group are working with the coming home flower essences, there is a resonant field that will develop within the group. And what I will be available to do in the future is that there can be a stage two so that people can contact me if they have a group that's working with coming home flower essences. They can contact me and ask me if I can prepare, or I don't know if I'll prepare them, but I can douse with my, because I've got way more flower essences and gem elixirs now, and I can douse and I can provide them with a prescription for flower essences for their group. And what I see happening is that I think that what will happen if there's, say, group A, B, C, group A will have a certain number of flower essences, group B will have different flower essences, but some are the same as group A. And then group C will have different flower essences, but some of the same as group B and group A. And so what happens is that you will be creating another network of coherent frequencies with other flower essences. And it's just like you build a network with the coming home flower essences, and then you build another network with other flower essences. And I can see where this could go on for a very long time. Just continuing to work with this modality to build networks of coherence and connection between the people who are striving to make the world the more, the more beautiful place we all know is possible.
Yes, it's a song. It's a symphony that we all are a part of. And thank you so much for this really wonderful presentation. A lot of great information, and I encourage everyone, take the Scotch broom medicine and take action. Like, don't just listen to this information and be like, well, that's interesting. I mean, experience it, be a part of it. We're looking to build this movement and activate our energy to reintegrate and unify with the forces of nature, expressed through these flowers and these gem and rock essences, and these wonderful, powerful affirmations. Reach out to us, and we can, provide you with a document to overview of kind of the information that we've really expanded on, that Aalisha's expanded on so much in this, and get you your own flower essence to work with as well.
Mhm. Okay, thanks. All right, so I'm going to finish off with a poem.
Great.
Okay. And this is the poem Desiderata by Max Ehrmann. This is included in your package of information. And what I do is for every phrase that's in this poem or poetic prose piece, I identify the flower essences that help with this. So this poetic prose piece is called Desiderata, and it is basically a template for how to live life. And so I'm just going to read the poem, and then we'll just end. I'm finished talking, and you're finished talking, so we
Yeah,
can just end it.
just briefly to add, like the way that you can, just so you're clear, the way you can get in touch with us is reach out through email. There'll be our emails in the description of this video, and
Yeah.
we're happy to collaborate and communicate
Yeah.
with you.
And especially collaboration. People who want to do research on this, like there's tons of things that I can think of to, like particularly with the Veda technique. What was that?
Of working with water and how it
Yeah.
remembers frequencies.
Yeah. Like there's just so much research potential in this. So if anybody would like to do some research with me, I'd really like to talk about that as well.
Amazing.
Yeah. Okay. So here's a poem. You can just enjoy. Go placidly amid the noise and haste, and remember what peace there may be in silence. As far as possible, without surrender, be on good terms with all persons. Speak your truth quietly and clearly, and listen to others, even to the dull and ignorant. They too have their story. Avoid loud and aggressive persons. They are vexatious to the spirit. If you compare yourself to others, you may become vain or bitter, for always there will be greater and lesser persons than yourself. Enjoy your achievements as well as your plans. Keep interested in your own career. However humble, it is a real possession in the changing fortunes of time. Exercise caution in your business affairs, for the world is full of trickery. But let this not blind you to what virtue there is. Many persons strive for high ideals, and everywhere life is full of heroism. Be yourself. Especially do not feign affection. Neither be cynical about love. For in the face of all aridity and disenchantment, it is as perennial as the grass. Take kindly the counsel of years, gracefully surrendering the things of youth. Nurture strength of spirit to shield you in sudden misfortune. But do not distress yourself with dark imaginings. Many fears are born of fatigue and loneliness. Beyond a wholesome discipline, be gentle with yourself. You are a child of the universe. No less than the trees and the stars, you have a right to be here. And whether or not it is clear to you, no doubt the universe is unfolding as it should. Therefore, be at peace with God, whatever you conceive that to be. And whatever your labors and aspirations in the noisy confusion of life, keep peace in your soul. With all its sham, drudgery, and broken dreams, it is still a beautiful world. Be cheerful. Strive to be happy.